Alright, so I'm going to provide some editing and exporting tips, so all your time spent on post-production can be optimized. Again, we're editing on a Final Cut system, but all the information given can be used across all platforms. It's a standard practice to keep all your video on a separate video hard drive. When you end up with multiple hard drives, having unique names makes them easier to find. I recommend keeping a drive index to keep track of all your projects. You should also label the physical drive. These are some folders I recommend to keep your hard drives organized: Sequence, Export, Graphics, Music. Keep Final Cut projects in the Sequence bin. All exports and encodes in an Export bin under a project subfolder. Additional assets like slates, lower thirds, and photos in a Graphics folder, also in the project subfolder. If it hasn't already been created, Final Cut will create a Capture Scratch folder with a subfolder with each project you work on. Having these things organized like this makes it easy to locate or move things to different systems or hard drives later down the road, especially if you take a look at the project a few months or even a few years down the line. So, this is how I like to organize my bins: Sequence, Footage, Graphics, and Music. Name your sequence the same as your project name, followed by V1. For each subsequent draft, duplicate the previous sequence and name it V2, V3, and so on. Separate interview from B-roll. Turn on thumbnails and move the column closer to your file name. This makes it easier to identify your footage. It's important to learn the keyboard shortcuts so you can distribute your movements along the keyboard and mouse hand. For instance, hit the B button for blade, rather than moving your cursor over to the blade icon. Hit R for a ripple tool, and hit Command S to save your project periodically. There's a keyboard shortcut for virtually every function in Final Cut. When you're ready to export, click File, Export using QuickTime Conversion. Click Options, click Settings, Compression Type H.264, Data Rate restrict to 6,000 kilobits a second, Quality High or Best, and click OK. Click Size HD 1280 by 720, click OK. Codec AAC restrict data rate to 320 kilobits per second. Click OK and save your file. If you're using Final Cut 10, you will need to export these specs using Compressor. Many editors like to have a native full resolution output of each draft. So when you export, click File, Export, QuickTime Movie. Be sure Make Movie Self-Contained is clicked. At this point, you can drag your full resolution file into Compressor. One big advantage of using Compressor instead of a QuickTime conversion is the ability to save these output specs as a preset so you can export all StudioNow projects with just one click. Well, there you have it, some tips and tricks in post-production to make your editing go a little smoother.